Hey, what is going on, Notre Dame fans? This is blueandgold.com's Mike Singer, joined by former Fighting Irish captain and linebacker Mike Goolsby. We've done these post-game shows all season long. First year we've done them at blueandgold.com. So this is the first post-game show with a loss that we'll talk about, and certainly was not a pretty loss, Mike. So I will just let you have the floor. Mike, give us your instant takeaways from the game.
Instant takeaways. We've discussed this briefly at times throughout our relationship, Mike, and there's an issue with the culture of the program in that when you watch these kids play, you just don't see kids. And this is ironic. Outside of Book tries to make things happen, and it obviously doesn't always work. And I'm going to focus a lot of my energy tonight, Mike, on the defense, and that you just outside of our front four, occasionally they seem to run hot or they run cold in terms of their want to or willingness to make a play, but you just don't see kids make exceptional efforts often, and you don't see them. They're not having. I hate to say they're having fun because it sounds kind of lame, but it's like a cultural thing where the kids play robotic, and they don't do anything like outside of their natural ability. And we saw that a lot, like we'll get into this and we'll actually get a chance to see some clips tonight, but like in run fits on defense, like people are magnets. Nobody ever gets off a block. Nobody sticks their head in there really. And it's just disappointing to see. And the arrow of the blame is going to get pointed at Kelly. It's going to get pointed at Reese. It's going to get pointed at the coaching staff. And that's a big part of it. But sometimes, Mike, and you're the recruiting guru, like it just comes down to me sometimes. And I was proud, like I was that guy, and I wasn't the best player in the world, but I gave a shit. And like I tried, and I was tough. And you just don't see that like when it matters. In these big time games, putting all the scheme and everything aside, there's plenty of opportunities watching tonight's game, specifically in the run game, where nobody gets off a block and makes a play. Like you're going to see us get out jumped or outran sometimes in a one-on-one scenario on the edge. Like you can almost forgive that and tack that up to just maybe a lesser ability, but the lack of the want to and the drive and like the pride that what Notre Dame fans have seen throughout the years and recent history here, like it reared its head again tonight. So that was kind of my takeaway. And I was trying to think, Mike, I mean, the whole second half, right? We're looking forward to this podcast. It's like, well, geez, what the hell are we going to talk about? And it's almost like it's like somebody's getting picked on at school. Like this is sort of like Notre Dame's defense tonight. It's like you just keep getting picked on, you keep getting bullied at school, but then you don't confront the bully and throw a punch because you don't want to get suspended for 3 days and like your GPA to go down. Like at a certain point in time, like you have to like puff your chest up and like do something about it. And we didn't tonight. And it's disappointing, man. So like when you get into the recruiting thing, it's like this kid, the safety that we signed, Guy, if I'm pronouncing his last name.
G, yeah.
Like that kid, yeah, G, like watching that kid's tape, that's a kid that's not going to take it. Like that's a kid that will step up and sort of hopefully like more kids like that infuse that kind of grit into the program, because the talent I think is there. We have competent enough talent. I think the missing link is like that the fun aspect. You watch Clemson play; those dudes have fun, and the toughness where somebody throws a punch at you, you're gonna swing back, or sometimes you're not even gonna wait for them to you swing first. And I feel like we need more dudes like that on the team. So that's kind of my takeaway, man.
Well, getting into the game, look, Mike, November 7th, Notre Dame punched back. They punched first, actually, with that Kyron Williams touchdown run.
Yeah.
What went wrong? What went different? Outside of kind of the mindset kind of thing, if that's kind of where your head's at. What went wrong schematically? Both sides of the ball. I mean, heck,
So
offense, defense, special teams. It was all bad, Mike.
let me so yeah, you kind of had two questions in there, and it's your first question, Mike, was fantastic, and you're getting really good at this, buddy. Um, what went wrong? Like, yeah, man, the first drive, like we looked great, right? Kick a field goal. Where the bottom fell out and where we just they popped our balloon, all the air went out was on that 4th and 3. Avery Davis dropped that ball. After that, it was a complete gong show. Like the wheels, like not like one wheel fell off, it's all the wheels fell off. Miss a field goal. But to me, that was it on that drop on 4th and 3. And it wasn't a perfect throw. It was a very, 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 very catchable. You or I could have caught that ball in a game with a helmet on. But after that, we're deflated. And that's when you talk about, Mike, like the mental toughness. It's like, dude, this is a big time game. We're playing a big time team. There's going to be ebbs and flows to the game. And that's what you keep swinging. You don't put your hands in your pockets. And that's what we did tonight. Schematically, I'm going to focus on the defense, start with the defense. I don't know, and none of us will ever know. We could pontificate all we want, but Clark Lee's decision to leave and the timing of it all and the announcement of all that has to factor into the game plan, even if it's a 5-10% decline in terms of like preparation. That's a very real thing. Maybe what we saw more of today is like these kids love that guy, and Coach Lee's I don't have a bad thing to say about the guy. He's an exceptional person, really, too. But when your leader's gone and the guy that you've been riding with for 3 years, he's bouncing, that hurts your heart as a player. And I dealt with that when we played a bowl game without our head coach, and that was a nightmare because you had all your assistants were looking for other jobs, and I mean they didn't care about the game. So I think defensively that might have been a thing in terms of like the team spirit and maybe just a little bit of lack of prep. Early in the game, we didn't see much like blitzing. And like maybe you go back and say, well, that's maybe where we didn't spend the time to scheme or cook some up. Offensively, we know what Clemson does, and it's like they bring people, they move people in terms of their front seven. They bring heat. I did text you early in the game. I'm like, we're going to hit a big run here next series. And we did, just because we caught them in some movement and we had a gap that kind of opened itself up. Our offensive line, to me, seemed to let us down. They couldn't track all the movement. So it was just kind of a cluster, what back there. And then throughout the season, since day one, even before the season, we knew that we could rely on our offensive line and they were going to be the strength and more or less the backbone of the team. And they have been that, but today they were just sort of discombobulated because all the movement, and then that carries over into the ability to pass protect. Trying to make some educated guesses as to what we might see for the game plan. I threw a couple. I chimed in on the message board a couple times this week, and I thought that maybe we'd see Tommy Tremble show up, and he did. I think he had like 3 catches, caught 3 balls, and I thought we might see some like middle screens to hit them, Mike, where those linebackers are vacating. Dude, did we run one screen today?
Mike, I can't remember the last screen Notre Dame's ran, honestly.
So, like the average football fan, it's football 101. My girlfriend knows at this point, like, oh, they're bringing heat, they're blitzing everybody, they're bringing the kitchen sink. It's like, okay, football 101 is you throw a screen to slow that down. We didn't see that today. So I don't know what to say. It's just, yeah, it was just like, yeah, it was just like I don't know. It just never, once we started bleeding, we just couldn't stop the bleeding, and it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. But I do really feel like if we all go back and rewatch that game, that 4th and 3 drop, that's when it seemed to be like, all right, that was the beginning of the end.
All right, I think we should go ahead and address the elephant in the room, which is Mike, the playoff picture. So you have
Yeah. Okay.
Alabama, the number one team in the country, as we are recording this. They are about 15 minutes from start time against Florida. Of course, Notre Dame dropped 34-10 against Clemson today. And then Clemson, the number 3 team, obviously beat the Fighting Irish. So Alabama, we'll assume Alabama wins, Mike. Then Alabama, Clemson locks for the playoffs. And then you have, I would say, 4 teams vying for 2 spots. Notre Dame at 10-1, Ohio State at 6-0, Texas A&M at 8-1, and the broadcast crew has kept talking about Oklahoma. They have 2 losses. I don't see that, man. I would
Sure.
throw in Cincinnati if you really are valuing the loss column. But maybe they don't care, and maybe they think Oklahoma's the hottest team, so then they'll throw them in there. But tweet from our blueandgold.com Twitter account, BGI News, just popped through my phone. Our guys are covering the press conference right now. This is what Brian Kelly just said on Notre Dame's case for the playoffs. We've got two top 15 wins. We've got a win over this Clemson team when they were number 1 in the country, which, of course, Mike, when Notre Dame beat Clemson, all the naysayers were saying, well, they didn't have Trevor Lawrence, they didn't have Skulls because they didn't have these starters. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, it's, I don't know what you say to that right now. I'm sure there's a good, well thought out point, but playoff picture, guys. I think Notre Dame getting that touchdown to cut it from. Look, we all know this was a blowout. The committee knows it was a blowout, but 34-3 versus 34-10. I think there's a difference there. Maybe it's not a difference to whether or not they get into playoff. I don't know, but to me, Mike, I think it helps a little bit. So I'll let you have the floor on what you think about the playoff picture.
Yeah. So, do we want to go to the playoff? Do we? It's so there's I guess that's our playoff chances. So there's like the hard data, like Brian Kelly just said. We've got 2 top 15 wins. We already beat this team. Everybody knows it was without the arguably the best player in the country, but it is true we did beat them. We're 1-1. But I look at it like, by nature, I tend to be sort of a half glass, half empty. It's about 3/4 full right now, but I don't know if we want to go to the playoff, man. I don't know if we want to go to the playoff. Who deserves to get in? You could make a strong argument that we deserve to get in. I don't think Ohio State probably deserves to get in. And you talk about our game. We had a rough time with Clemson today, but Ohio State had a rough time with Northwestern today. I mean, they were down basically the majority of the game. And I know they had a bunch of players out, et cetera, but that's still data. Like, so it wasn't, they were 21. I mean, I lost a ton of money today. They were a 21-point favorite and just kind of eked out a win against Northwestern. Texas A&M is the interesting one. But just to finish up Ohio State, I don't think Ohio State deserves to get in. They had a rough time with Clemson. And the Big Ten this year is rough. Like, the Big Ten's hard to watch. It's just, so it's like they're so I'm not super impressed by them going 6-0 in the Big Ten this season in particular. A&M's an interesting one. It's a C program. So Cincinnati's not going to get in. I mean, let's get real. So it's going to come down to like A&M or us more than likely, or Ohio State. So yes, you've got Bama, Clemson. Everybody talks about Ohio State. It'd just be fun to have it without Ohio State. I think it'd be fun to have a playoff scenario without Ohio State for once. I feel like because they play in such a poor conference that they're just gifted a playoff run every year, and it'd be nice to shake some things up. So if it was us and A&M, I don't know. I can hardly talk about it, much less make that call. So
I think Alabama 1, Clemson 2, and then you really don't want Texas A&M. Or this is my opinion. If I were in the committee, I wouldn't want Texas A&M Alabama rematch because Alabama steamrolled them. So you probably put A&M 3, and then maybe Notre Dame 4, and then, oh man, for all the success that Notre Dame's had this season, that 10-0 regular season, if they get stomped by Alabama, it's gonna leave a really rough taste in the mouth of
But
Fighting
to your
Irish
to your
fans.
point about to your point about not wanting A&M back in it because they got boat raced by Bama, we just got boat raced by Clemson, and Bama is uh, miles ahead of where Clemson is. I mean, Bama's unbelievable, and what Bama does well is what we do poorly. So I don't know how um, how I guess how intentional the committee is when they're watching these games. I always get the sense that they just start watching maybe the last third of the season or last quarter of the season when they really start to dial in. But what Clemson does well in so many ways is what we do poorly. So if you're looking at, oh, we can't have A&M and Bama match up again, it's like, well, if Notre Dame played Bama to, next week, it might be uglier. So, but we'll
Yeah,
see. We
yeah,
had an opportunity, Mike, and that's the beauty of like of sports and of life. Sometimes it's like you've got your opportunity. So it's like, well, now we're gonna piss and moan about if we get bounced out of the playoff, we're gonna piss and moan that we deserve to get in there. It's like, well, then you should have won the freaking game.
yeah,
I mean, that's just the way it goes,
yeah. In that
or
scenario,
or at
then
least not embarrassed yourself.
Notre Dame would be playing a rematch with Clemson in that scenario I laid out. So,
Sure.
or excuse me, if Notre Dame were at 3, then so I think, yeah, maybe Alabama 1, Clemson 2, A&M 3, Notre Dame 4. But yeah, we will see.
Either way, Mike. However it plays out, Mike. However it plays out as it pertains to the playoff, we're going to get what we deserve.
Sure.
So we either deserve to get in or we deserve to be bounced out. And we had an opportunity to write our own or make our own pathway, and we didn't do it today.
Super chat from CW Pura says, "Thanks for all your hard work this year. Certainly, if you guys are feeling, in the holiday spirit after brutal loss for Notre Dame, we certainly appreciate the super chats, guys. Helps keep the lights on. At
It's
blueandgold.com.
only hard work, Mike. Mike, it's only hard work on games like this, right? I mean,
Right. The North
you know,
Carolina one, we had somebody drop us a hundo, and I was like, I watched the video back, and it showed my wife and sister in law, like, my face. I went, and when we got that, I hope he's on the line here with us. But yeah, Mike, I want to just kind of looking at some of our topics. I'll ask you this one, Mike. How big of a difference did and guys, we're gonna get to your questions. We just got a couple other things we want to get to real quick. How big of a difference did Trevor Lawrence make compared to DJ Uiagalelei? Because guys, maybe idiots like me after that game were saying, "Oh man, well, what could have Trevor done that DJ didn't?" Well, I think we saw today, Trevor Lawrence, 25 of 36. 322 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and then what he did on the ground, 14 rushes, 90 yards, and a touchdown. It wasn't like Ian Book. When Ian Book runs for 90 yards, just those scrambles where it's like the defense kind of dominates the line of scrimmage, then Ian Book just kind of makes something happen. No, this was designed runs where he was just, running off tackle. So just how
so
good is Trevor Lawrence?
so to
Mike, you
answer your
said,
question, what? Yeah,
real quick, Mike, you said arguably the best player in college football. Man, he is definitely the best player in college football, and maybe in the past 5-10 years. I don't know. That's just me kind of saying off the cuff, but man, he's very good.
yeah, he's good. I don't know if you and I were texting about this throughout the week, but and I don't need, I'm sure Vegas had a prop bet on terms of the over under rushing yards for Trevor Lawrence, but in my mind it was like 75. Um, like I figured he'd rush for over under 75 yards, so we hit the over. In this game, our linebackers in general throughout the season do not have good instincts. They don't. Where Clark Lee, so to circumvent our lack of instincts, he blitzes people. So with Trevor Lawrence's, and we talked about this in the build up to this game, Mike, you and I, and Trevor Lawrence's ability on those quarterback read or those quarterback decide plays, they call them RPOs, whatever you want to label, however you want to label them, he freezes you just a millisecond, and that's where he gets that wiggle room. So that's the added element. I don't know if it's so much the yardage. Obviously, the yardage matters, the 90 plus yards that he had, but it's like it just makes a defender sort of throttle back in terms of their approach of when they want to come downhill and make a play. And then you're it's almost like you're playing the option at that point. Like it's like, do I put my head in here or do I jump outside? And you saw that all night long. So that's the added element that when you play DJ the first go around, he threw for 440 yards, but the linebackers against DJ didn't have the same threat of him pulling the ball and running it, so they could really truly Mike pin their ears back and come downhill and hammer ETN, which is why ETN rushed for whatever he had, 28 yards. So tonight there's a threat of Lawrence keeping the ball, and coupled with our complete lack of instincts up there, Drew White had 2 tackles tonight. That's what you get. So that's just, it's like, so yeah, hopefully that makes sense to our viewers and our listeners.
Sure. Super chat from Pete, $20 says, "Love you guys, Pete. We love you. Appreciate the support." John A1 with the super chat
Thanks,
as well.
Pete.
Yeah, appreciate that, Pete. John has been watching a ton of our videos. We appreciate you as well, man. He says Clemson was more balanced with Lawrence. The difference was the offense could not score once the run game was abandoned. Believe we just have
it's funny,
one.
Mike.
Tommy Rock 2 super chat.
Go
We
ahead.
appreciate that, Tommy.
I just to add to like another thought that sort of flashed across my brain. I want to grab it. The like 2 of the pillars of our team this year have been our running game and our defense. And there have been many articles written about how our defense is elite, yada yada yada. And our defense failed us tonight. So it's like, people, do you want to blame the offense? Do you want to blame the defense? Me as a defensive guy, I blame the defense because you just knocked down one of our pillars. So now we're trying to stand on one leg and run the ball. And they just go together. Running game and defense goes hand in hand. So I blame the defense a little bit, and maybe that's got to do with Clark Lee and his situation. But excuse me, Mike, my initial thought, first thing I said getting on the pod tonight was, we don't have dudes in particular spots, i.e. like your linebackers, where people are willing to pull the trigger and make a play, like roll the dice and make a play. And until you address that kind of like that toughness or whatever, there's probably more of the same.
One more super chat in here. We really appreciate these guys. C Evans 1992. $10. Not too happy about Coach Kelly's. He says Coach Kelly's been embarrassed time and time again in big games, and he's questioning the job status of Brian Kelly. All right, Mike.
Is there anything else you want to get into, or are we gonna jump into questions?
I was thinking we're gonna. You want to break down some film?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Let's do that. Yeah.
All
please.
right.
Please.
All right. Let me switch to this. I'm not sure why. So we're just gonna have.
Mike, while you're doing that, I'm gonna ad lib a little bit in terms of our last.
Sure.
The last sort of super chat / question in terms of, I saw a little blue. I couldn't quite read it on my screen, but that his job might be in jeopardy, something to that effect, Mike. It's really interesting because it's like Notre Dame was the number 2 team in the country, and it's like the administration, whomever, it's like at some point we got to decide what we're trying to do here. So in terms of like our academic standards and the type of kids that we're bringing into the football program versus like having dudes that are going to let their hang and go make plays, because it's like we're sort of in limbo. You got 1 foot in and you've got 1 foot out. Like we've got high academic, super high character, tremendous people, but then like on the flip side of that, you don't have guys that are willing to get themselves into like a dust up and kind of have that sort of that mental toughness. So that's going to be an interesting thing. So in terms of like Kelly's job security, if what the administration wants is to produce like super high caliber people, 3.0 plus GPA, graduate 100% of our kids, he's going to keep his job. But if the administration's like, well, we need to win some more games, that's an interesting, because that's it to me. It's like you don't have the kids that are willing to to step outside of themselves and let their hair down. So I just don't know what the standards are, what the expectations are from the administration outside of having high academic, high character kids. And it's not to say that you can't have a high character kid that isn't going to let his hair down. But I hope I'm making sense with that, Mike. Yeah, that's just like Mike. When I was there, man, I was a captain of the team. Sorry, the last rant. When
Yep.
I was there, I was a captain of the team, leading tackler, had 97 tackles, whatever. Won us a game against Tennessee. I never got interviewed. They never let me get interviewed. Ever.
Why?
Ever. Because I wasn't what they wanted the image of the program to be. Because I would say what I was going to say. You understand what I'm saying? So who I was off the field is who I was on the field. And it's like, well, they're going to pull the guy that writes poetry into the press room, and he's going to speak for the team versus the captain and the leading tackler, etc. So that's been going on for 20 years. So they've got to make their mind up. It's like, do we want to be an elite big time football program? You're going to have to let some kids in that aren't bad kids, but they might not have a 3.5 GPA coming out of high school and a 27 on their ACT. So otherwise, we're going to keep doing this over and over and over again.
Couple super chats.
Switch earbuds, Mike. I lost you last time we did this.
All right. Well, a couple super chats to get to, Mike. You go ahead and take care of your earbud situation. Steve Perry, $10. Says Notre Dame wins 10 games a year. Beat Clemson already. Do you believe, as I, that these rash of big game drubbings are beyond personnel now and it's just plain old culture? Steve, I'm gonna guess you joined us later because I want to say Mike. I eyed your super chat. I want to say Mike addressed that right before maybe you came on. Do you want to touch on that real quick, Mike?
In short, Steve Perry, R.I.P., Journey's lead singer. Don't stop believing, Steve. But yes, it's probably a culture thing. So go back and listen to the podcast. But yeah, I think the talent is more than sufficient. And we may never get those elite guys on the outside on our edges in terms of pass catchers. But I guess the equalizer sometimes, like Skalski, take Skalski, who's been a hot topic kind of leading up to this game. Skalski's not an elite athlete. I bet you $100 he doesn't run a sub-5 flat 40. I almost guarantee it. But that kid likes to mix it up. You need more of those kids. If you don't have the athlete, you got to have toughness. And you can't fold. And second half, man, third quarter ish, we folded. So I definitely think it's a culture thing. And I don't know if it's not a motivation thing. And this is me defending Brian Kelly. It's not a motivation thing. It's a character thing in terms of we have high character kids. They're not going to get in trouble off the field. Any of that, you don't have to worry. Coaches aren't going to lose sleep at night worrying about their kids getting in trouble. So they have high character in that regard. I'm talking about where somebody spits in your face and they take it. That's a lack of character in and of itself. So it's like tonight, we got pushed around and we just took it. And you never see anybody really, start chirping or it's just, it really bothers me.
Another super chat in here. $50. Brian, we really appreciate it. He says, thanks, guys, for all you do. We had our opportunities first half, but didn't execute like we have all year. Can't do that against Clemson when they are playing for their playoff lives. I think we can certainly agree with that, Brian. Couple more plays here, Mike. This is Clemson's up.
So I just think that not that Tyree should have been the guy. I'm not saying that at all, but I do think that throughout the course of the year, as opposed to a 90-10 split between Kyron and Tyree this year. So it'll be something to look for.
Big supporters, comes on a lot of these shows and has one of the greatest names. He says, Mike, fantastic job as usual. I'm a half a bottle of Johnny Walker Black and take it easy. Be safe, TT. We lack killer instincts, and we do, and it shows. All right, we are in full questions mode now.
Let's hit it. Let's fire them up.
Mike, I'm gonna pop for our YouTube audience the offensive stats on the screen again. Times, Mike, and there was actually a tweet that Patrick Angle put out. I was during the press conference. Then third down completions. That is just kind of wild to think about. But
great call by Patrick. Good catch on his part. And throughout the broadcast, you heard that Coach Venables, from the defensive coordinator from Clemson, was saying we got to stop them on third down, because the first go around we were 10 for 19 on first down. Obviously wasn't the case tonight, but they adjusted. And we usually do a little segment here on here, Mike, who flashed, and Clemson's defensive line just took our lunch money today. I like Book. I have a hard time talking negatively or speaking negatively about Book. He does his best back there. I think schematically, if we could have just sprinkled in some screens, 2, 3, 4, 5 screens, you could have given him a fighting chance to slow down that pass rush. But he's running for his life all night tonight. Still didn't turn the ball over. But just, yeah, not ideal. I just don't understand where you're blitzing all these people up the middle that Clemson consistently always does, that we can't run a shallow crosser, and then you kind of run layered routes where you have an over route and an under route. You didn't see any of that tonight. And then even down by the goal line on our first series down by the goal line, where we managed to kick a field goal, we ran 2 outbreaking routes down there. And we've seen over and over again, if I've seen it, Coach Venables at Clemson, who's making $2 million a year, has seen it. Book won't throw those balls. He just won't let it go. So you have to, you can't point the finger at anybody in particular. To me, I pointed at the defense, because they didn't even give us a shot tonight. Like they were sieved tonight on all levels. The running game, the passing game, quarterback running the ball, running back running the ball. It was a mess.
All right. Question in a super chat from Dylan. He says, can we talk about Ian Book not making reads and not holding the ball too long to offensive line wasn't as good, but we're good enough. Might have been a typo in there in that question. But yeah, O-line play, Mike.
Book can't see. Yeah, Book can't see. So there's all those things. I'll never forget it. And I wish so many fans that talk smack about quarterbacks could have the opportunity to do it. But like, if somebody ever gets a chance to watch the tight copy, Google it or YouTube it after you like our videos and subscribe. But like the tight copy, which is the end zone view, there's so many people flashing, and those quarterbacks have a split second to fit that ball in there, because they know where this person's supposed to be. So then you couple that with a 6 foot tall, 5'11" quarterback who's got all that movement in front of him, and he just never got comfortable. So it's easy for us to say, we'll throw the ball. He's not comfortable until he can actually see when he gets out of the pocket. I do think that there's often times where he's rolling out to his right, when he's fixed that, because early in the season, he was always leaking out to his left, Mike. He gets out to his right. He needs to stop. And even my girlfriend said this watching the game. God love her. It's like he's got to stop, set his feet, and then shoot the ball, where he keeps drifting. It's like eventually you have to, like, all right, I've escaped. I've got a second. Stop your feet, plant your feet, and let the ball rip, where he just keeps drifting. But I put more of the blame on the offensive line tonight. I mean, there was the one play you saw where they went back and highlighted Kyron's blitz pickup, where he kind of dumped Skalski, but our right guard on that play just fell on his ass, just fell down. It was poor. So yeah, everybody wants to point the finger at Book, but do yourselves a favor and rewatch the game and see if Trevor Lawrence was back there, could he have pulled the trigger? Assuming somebody was open, would he have been able to physically pull the trigger even at 6'6" with all his inherent ability?
Yeah, I personally can't put the blame on any one particular specific group. I think it's the whole offensive unit. You definitely want to get on the defense, Mike. But for me, 34 points allowed, they still could have won this game or been competitive. The 10 is where it's just pitiful, leaving points up.
Well, yeah, they could, they could have won the game, but for whatever reason. And like I said, it was after that 4th and 3 drop. It was just like the battery drained, like that. So that's what needs to be addressed. Forget the scheme, forget that. It comes down to those kids looking at themselves in the mirror and being like, "Yep, why does like on our run, like again, our run fits on defense. I come downhill, I do what I'm supposed to do. I'm where I need to be, but then slip the blocker and make the tackle. We just didn't take that extra step to like go make the play. So it's like, do you want the shine and the love? Do you want your name on a national broadcast with 10 million people? You want to get recognized for making a freaking play, or do you just want to play safe and not screw up, I guess? So yeah, I blame the defense. But what's the next question we got here, Mike?
Comments about receiver play, missing big play receiver, no separation tonight. That's kind of where I was getting at, and then I tailed off. In my previous comment was, the book was doing his, maybe not as much as in recent games, but he's kind of doing his scramble drill thing, and then you don't see him throw downfield. Of course, personally, I wish they scrapped the broadcast view and then the new broadcast view was behind the quarterback so you can see. I think real football junkies would love that, but I think most just typical people, casual fans, don't want that.
Here's a fun thought. Here's a fun thought. And who knows what this COVID year is like? Is McKinley kind of going to come back? Is Skoranek going to come back?
Doubtful.
So let's just say they probably doubtful. So they're both going to work out for the NFL. I doubt either one of them gets a combine invite. But let's see what they run their 40s in at their pro day. Let's see. So what's the over-under for Skoranek? 4.68. What's the over-under for McKinley? Something in that same neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all you need to know. So in terms of like, oh, we can't create separation, you're gonna blame Reese's scheme. There's some validity to that. But when you go watch these guys run 40s, and it won't be too long till they do their pro day, their combine workouts. Let's see what they run a 40 in.
Super chat from Mr. Martin says, why can't we get our athletes touches? Tyree not running until the fourth quarter is pathetic.
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, we didn't see any sort of creativity. We didn't see like a lot of shifts. It was almost like we regressed going into this game plan wise. But yeah, I think you could do a lot with a kid like Tyree. And I thought maybe we'd see like a little bit of hurry up this week, hurry up in terms of our offensive scheme, so you don't give Clemson time to set up these blitzes and communicate, et cetera, et cetera. We didn't see that. You didn't see many like shifts or anything. Another thing I wanted to touch on, I took some notes during the game. With as much movement as Clemson creates and twists and stunts and things, you can't pull guards against a defense that's doing that. You can't. Like, you can move Tremble around like you do as a lead blocker, but when you pull a guard, if you've got somebody that just happens to knife through there, the play's over. So like in that scenario, to me, when you're playing against a defense that shifts and moves and stunts and blitzes, it's like you almost have to convert to a zone scheme. So yeah, I don't know. The question is, like, why didn't our playmakers or our athletes get the ball? Your two best athletes are the tight ends and your running backs. Outside of that, I mean, Avery Davis is a good-looking athlete, but in terms of the kids that we've seen play consistently and get a lot of run this year, Tremble's a great athlete. Mayer's a great athlete. Both of our running backs are studs. But on the edges, I mean, forever, that's going to be an issue until it gets resolved. So like when you guys watch when you watch Clemson, or excuse me, when you watch Alabama play tonight,
mm-hmm.
That's an athlete. When you watch these kids out that they've got playing outside.
Super chat from Joseph, $5. We really appreciate that. Another one here from Starting 3. He says, is Lee focused on Notre Dame or Vanderbilt? Mike, you kind of touched on this.
Yeah. The only thing I could, and I have a unique experience for this, or in regards to this, is my fifth year, senior year, going into our bowl game. We were playing Oregon State in the Insight.com Bowl. We were arguably, I think, the worst team in the country in pass coverage, and all Oregon State did was throw the ball. And admittedly, I didn't even want to go to the game because I knew we were going to lose. And I think they ran the ball 3 times in the first half. They just threw the ball. But going into that game, Tyrone Willingham had been fired, and subsequently all of his assistants, and this is no fault of their own, but all of their assistants in the weeks leading up to the game or the days leading up to the game, any spare time that they had, Mike, they were on the phone trying to find another job because they've got families to feed, et cetera, et cetera. So you couldn't blame them. So that stuff matters. It does. Because you're dealing with human beings. And like I said, I think it could be a little bit disheartening to the players as well, and that they lose their leader and the guy that they've been following and trusting for so many years. I don't like the timing of it. And I mean, it's Vanderbilt football, Mike. Could they not have waited a week to make the announcement? Like, oh, we're going to lose all these 5-star recruits. Get out of here. You could have waited a week. I don't know how any of that stuff works, though, admittedly.
Charles says, Mike, how do you think this affects our recruiting? One quick thing I'll mention is that the early signing period wrapped up yesterday, so doesn't affect 2021 recruiting very much, except for maybe one or two guys. But even then, I can't imagine that the kid's going to make their 4 to 5 year decision based on one game that they're not even a part of. But Mike, do you have any thoughts on from a former 5-star recruit's point of view?
I just think if you're, and I'm in sales for a living, Mike. So how does it affect recruiting? That question's probably, you're probably expecting us to say like, oh, it's going to adversely or negatively affect recruiting. I don't believe that's the case. On the flip side, I do think you could be talking to some of these elite 5-star type edge players, wide receivers that might have solid grades, maybe not exceptional grades, but they've got solid grades, and you could sell like, dude, you're going to come and play. Like, look at who we have playing right now. These are our starters, and you could literally run circles around these kids. So I think you could almost use it as a positive. Be like, that's the missing piece. That's what you're trying to sell. That's the missing piece, is these elite talent on the edges, and go find those guys. So if you could turn the negative into a positive in that regard.
Keep the questions coming, guys. We'll go live here for a few more minutes. Not seeing too many questions. One guy called me out and said I'm avoiding his question, so now I'm definitely not gonna bring your question on the screen. So that's a good way not to get your question answered. We'll go to our blueandgold.com message board, Mike, SDS123.
Let's do it. Yeah. Let's go rapid fire, dude. Let's fire them
Yeah,
off. Let's
she
go.
asks, one of our fantastic women posters on our blueandgold.com website. She says, how much did our offensive line play impact the offense?
Quite a bit. We touched on this earlier. It's been a strength of the team all year long. And I think Clemson created so much, frankly, just havoc, Mike, that it's like what's the expression? Like, you can't hit what you can't see, and that they couldn't. I'm using the word track. They couldn't track all the movement, and that obviously takes away your aggressiveness, similar to the way that Trevor Lawrence did running those quarterback read plays. So yeah, our offensive line. It's more so what Clemson did, Mike, than defensively than what we didn't do as an offensive line, if that makes sense.
All right, I'm not seeing really any more any questions here, so we will we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We really appreciate everyone joining the show here live. We appreciate those who watch back, and of course our podcast audience. Appreciate you guys hanging with us as well. And you just, if you're one of those people, thousands of people who listen to our podcast, and maybe you should just check out what we're doing on our YouTube page. Pretty unique stuff we're doing, but also I understand if you're out for a run, like I rarely do, then podcast is the way to go. But we just want to say we appreciate you guys as well. Make sure to go to blueandgold.com. We will have trying to get a live show going Sunday night for playoff reaction. I believe tomorrow night is when they're coming out with the playoff rankings, so I'm trying to get a live show ready for that. But otherwise, we will catch you guys later. Appreciate you guys joining.